Okay, I'm a student of organic farming here in Vienna, and I'm doing research on farm succession outside the family. The reason for that is that I want to start a farm, but my parents are not farmers, so I got interested in how that could work. And maybe if I start from the beginning, I grew up in probably one of the most industrialized agricultural parts of Austria, which is very close to Vienna. And I grew up seeing farming as, men driving tractors and producing vegetables for companies that will sell deep fry vegetables, that kind of thing. And I was never really interested in farming because of that. I was very interested as a kid and as a teenager in nature conservation and animal rights, that kind of thing, ecological stuff. And so I guess farmers were always a bit the enemy because I only knew industrialized farming, really. And I was involved in fair trade. I ran a fair trade shop, a little thing in my school. And so I guess through that I came to learn that there is such a thing as organic agriculture and that that's interesting and more ecological and all that stuff. And when I finished high school, I decided that I wanted to do something with my hands and not just brain work as I have been used to do. And so I volunteered for a year at an organic farm. It's a program in Austria. There are about 10 people a year, I think, that do that. And I liked it a lot. Or I learned a lot about farming, but also they had an organic store. I learned a lot about running a store. I learned a lot in the household and in the office and so on. And there were some disappointments, I guess, because it was much better than the industrial farms I knew, but it was still not what you think of as a farm when you read books or whatever. It was not the romantic image that you have of what a farm should be. And so I guess that's when I started thinking out about what a farm actually is and what kind of farm would be a farm that I would like to work at. But I also started realizing that I do like working on a farm and that it's something that I'm really interested in. I guess that's to do with my love for food. I really love food, and I love good food, and I like being connected with the production of good food and producing good food in community, I guess. And so I decided that it would be good to learn more about that. And everybody was telling me that I should be going to university. And I wasn't so sure about that, but then I thought, okay, I'll try it. And I did agricultural sciences. And I liked it more than I thought, because at BOKU, my university, you're actually pretty free to choose subjects. And I did a lot of different things and got a good overview, I think, of different perspectives on farming and how it's connected with other things in the world. And so that was interesting. And in the second or third year I focused on, or you could specialize in organic farming, and I did that. And I always did my summer jobs and so on organic farms to get a little bit more practice. But I think it was only later on in my studies that I realized I actually want a farm. I don't just want to have a job that is related to ecology and maybe look at farms and help them work more, produce more ecologically or whatever. But I really want to work on a farm. And I also knew from the farm where I worked after school that I didn't want to run a family farm because I knew how stressful that was, and the people I worked with there, they never went on holiday, even though they didn't have farm animals or so. They were just so busy with the shop that they were really stressed, and I thought that that's not what I want to be doing, and so I got more interested in community farms or collective farms. So that's that side. And when I was on Erasmus exchange in Belgium, I also worked on a farm, and there I somehow came across an article about the Dutch Biodynamic Association and how they have a program that helps young farmers get land by connecting them with biodynamic farmers who don't have successors and who are looking for people. And that was actually the first time I think I heard about extrafamilial farm succession. And they also had a fund that finances that buys the land of these farmers and just regulates the farm succession, I guess, over a long period of time, and really takes the land out of the market. And I found that idea really fascinating, so I got more into it, and I realized that there are several groups in Austria also working on this issue of access to land for beginning farmers. And all of them focus on organic or sustainable farming, because the idea is that if the land has already been worked organically for so many years, it would be bad to go back to conventional agriculture. So preserving the land for sustainable farming and providing opportunities for young farmers, and also valuing the work of previous generations, I guess. And so that connected with the goal of maybe having a farm once with a group of friends is why I'm so interested in this. And yeah, I'm doing my thesis now on looking at initiatives in Western Europe that foster, is that the right word, or that enable these processes of extrafamilial farm succession or access to land. There are a lot of different approaches, and there's very little research about them. Or there is research on the specific approaches, or on farm succession in general, and the whole intergenerational aspects and so on, the sociological side. But there is less on these initiatives because they're a rather recent phenomenon in many cases. And I know of, as I said, of several groups that are trying to do something like that, and they also encouraged students to do research on these things because it would help them to get data from other initiatives that are already established. There's also the European Network on Access to Land that I'm connected with, I was lucky enough to hear that they're doing a seminar on farm continuity, and I could participate in that, and I met a few people who are already working on access to land or in such initiatives, and they also, the main thing that they agreed on was the big lack of data on what they're actually what they're doing, and the need for more research. And so my focus is to look at who are the actors in this field or who are the initiatives that are already there, and who are the organizations that are trying to establish new ones. How are they interacting, and how are their approaches different or similar? Because of course there are a lot of regional and national differences in policies and legal frameworks and things like that, also cultural framework. And so I want to look at how the approaches are different or similar, but also, or mainly, looking at what factors are supporting their work or hindering them in their work, and success strategies and so on. So I want to do qualitative interviews, but I'm quite slow with starting because there has been a lot of other stuff happening in my family, and so I've actually been thinking about the subject for nearly 2 years now, but only in the concept phase of my master thesis now. So that's that, I think.
We have a kind of generous time, and so I guess I'd like to start back with the values and the hopes that first led you in this direction. I mean, you're a city kid, or an industrial area kid, right? Where did all these thoughts come from? I mean, how are you different from the kids who decided when they got out of school to go work in a factory? What made that difference for you?
Well, I think as I said, I grew up close to the city, but I actually don't consider myself as a city kid.
Okay.
It's a rather, I guess, for Austria, a small town, but yeah. I didn't spend a lot of time in Vienna as a kid, even though my parents worked in Vienna. I spent a lot of time outside. We had a big garden. And I went to school even further out in the countryside. And I spent a lot of time in the fields, and there's a little nature reserve near where we lived. And I think I just loved being outside, and I loved observing nature. And I learned pretty early on in school, I think, that of all the threats to nature and how humanity is destroying a lot of stuff, and how an ecological lifestyle makes sense and things like that. And I think that happened so early in my childhood that it really made a big impression on me. Like, I think I grew up with a bit the feeling that I have to save the world. And my parents are also, they were not that much into the ecological side of things, but they come from the I guess progressive Christian side of development aid and helping the third world in a collaborative way. That's how the fair trade thing came up in my life. And so they were always, or I think I grew up with the idea that I can make a difference by participating in projects or working on issues that are important to me. And there was something else I wanted to say. Yeah, another thing is that it's interesting in retrospect, but I didn't see it as that important as a kid. My mother grew up on a farm in the south of Lower Austria, and I spent a lot of time there as a kid. It was less industrialized than the farms in my region, but also not what I thought that farms in the old days were like. So I think there was a certain sense of nostalgia. I always read a lot, and I read a lot about kids like me who like to be outside or to play with animals and whatever. And so I had this romantic image of what it was like in the old days. And I think this sense of nostalgia and that things are worse than they used to be played an important part in making me want to change things or go back to something that I wasn't sure what it was, but and I think through this learning more about organic farming over the years, I learned that it's not about going back, of course, it's about going forward. But yeah, that's an important issue, I think, that made me interested also in things like what's it called? Selbstversorgung?
Self-sufficiency.
Yeah, self-sufficiency. And I think as a teenager especially, I was very different from the other kids in that I didn't like buying things. I was more interested in sewing my own clothes than in going shopping with the rest of the group. Which is also partly influenced from my parents, I think, but I don't know, it's just that I was because I had such a strong sense of the many things that people are doing wrong in consuming resources and so on. I was always, or I tried to be very creative in where I got my stuff, and that it took me a long time to realize that food is such a big issue as it actually is. I think that started because I did an exchange year when I was 15, I think. I lived in Ireland for a year, and I stayed with the family of a friend of my father, and that's, I think, where I was first given an opportunity to work in an organic garden. I was doing it was called transition year. It's a year between the first phase of school, I guess, and then the graduating years. And we did a lot of work experience and orientation things to find out what we want to do with our lives. It was very important for me at that point in my life because I thought I should quit school and join Greenpeace, and my parents thankfully disagreed with that idea and arranged for me to do this program. And in one of these work experience programs, I worked on in an organic vegetable garden, and I really liked it. I remember seeing a lot of vegetables in their full form for the first time. Like, I didn't know what broccoli looked like when it was growing and things like that. And that was fascinating for me. Also, I didn't know things like how much water does a plant need, or how do I tell the weeds from the plants that I can leave in, and stuff like that. It was really very, very basic things, but I loved the work. I loved how simple it was, and how these people were outside, and no matter what the weather was like, and there was always something to do, and very interesting people working there as well. And I think that's when I started looking more at food and how food is produced and what food I consume. As I said, the fair trade aspect was important to me. That was in the parish where I grew up. There was a small fair trade shop run by a group that included my parents, and me and a few other friends from that community loved helping with running the shop already as kids. And this organic perspective added a new dimension to it, in that I realized that fair trade doesn't necessarily only have to be about the third world, but that it's also about farmers here and which type of farmers you support, and what they earn, or how things that are very cheap in the supermarket cannot be fair anyway. And yeah, I remember also that there were some projects later in school where we looked at globalization and how globalization has changed the foods that we eat, or whether or not it makes sense, or just phenomena like that. We have, I don't know, grapes from Argentina in the supermarket and they're cheaper than the Austrian ones. And I think I was angry about a lot of things like that, and I didn't really see how I could change something. I also didn't really know anybody who, or only in something. I wasn't aware that the farmers in my region, or no, there are no farmers in my region, I think, or I wasn't aware of anywhere I could just go and buy things, because they all deliver to the big companies and there is no direct marketing, or I wasn't aware of it. And when I got more interested in that, I first learned about food chains and shorter food chains, and realized, okay, this is where the nearest organic farmer is. How can I go there? What does he sell? And I was very enthusiastic. Later on, I learned more about organic farming, and I realized that just because it's organic, it's not necessarily something I support, because there are different kinds of organic farms. So I think there was a lot of getting to know new things, being enthusiastic, and then learning also to look more critically at it, and exploring, and always really trying to find out what it really is that is closest to what I want to support. Yeah.
So, what I'm hearing is the story of somebody becoming an ethical person slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's clear that your parents were support for that.
Mm-hmm.
And that you got information from your school that was
Mm-hmm.
useful. Do you think your school was support for your growing up in the ways that are important to you?
Yes. I think that in primary school, I remember that there were a lot of very important influences. In my town, there is there's an organization that somehow arranges school trips where we participated, and we learned about things like greenhouse gases. That was a very memorable thing that I remember from the first years of primary school. And I don't know if that happens in most towns, or if it's just because we happen to have this organization. And I also remember that there's a magazine for pupils about animals and nature, and not everybody got that, but I did, because I was always interested in animals, and I think it's to this animal rights or animal protection thing that I got interested in that. And so I guess without that school magazine, I would have had less information about that, or it would have, it was just a lucky thing that introduced me to ecology and sustainability. Later on in school, I think I was also strongly influenced by the lack of information on what I was interested in. I went to to a school with a language focus because I was also always interested in languages and because it was a good school in my region. I remember wondering after the first 4 years of school if there was something more environment related that I could go to for the last 4 years of school. And I didn't really find anything that suited my interests, or else, of course, I just wanted to stay in my school because of friends and so on, and because it was close to my home. But that's also a reason why I went abroad for a year, because I was really frustrated with what we learned and what we didn't learn. And I learned it made me learn to look for my own information and have my hobbies that teach me things. And so in that sense, high school was also an important influence in that it taught me to follow what I'm really interested in, even if that's not what I'm offered. But nonetheless, I went to a good school, and I think I got a good basic education anyway, and so that's something that I think is also like I said, I wouldn't be where I am now if I had quit school and just become an activist or something. Not that it's possible anyway at 15, but I think it was important to go through that and to see what I'm interested in, also by the comparison with all the things I'm not interested in. And I am the only one of my class who did anything with natural sciences even, but also nobody else would have been interested in farming or anything like that. They all became went on to study languages or business administration or things like that.
You mentioned hobbies.
Mm-hmm.
How are those important for you?
Hobbies are important for me, and as I said, I always like to be outside a lot. As a kid, I just played outside in this nature reserve that I mentioned, or in our garden, and there was a time when I did less things outside. I always also like to read, and that's also how I got a lot of information when I was in school and beginning to be interested in other things. A lot of reading, and after a while gardening came up. As I said, after the Ireland experience, gardening became more interesting. But it wasn't really until a few years ago that I made the step to actually start a little vegetable garden in my parents' home. And now in Vienna, I also have a balcony for the first time since I live in Vienna, which is already 7 years or so. So it wasn't possible, but it was something that I was always reading about and being interested in. And I think that, and traveling. Traveling is probably the hobby that I spent most energy on in my high school time. And I remember learning to look at landscapes and reading them as one of the most fascinating travel experiences. Seeing how landscapes are different and how what people produce is different, or that's also connected to always looking for nature and learning more and more that it's difficult to find what this ideal nature that I was always thinking about, because most spaces are influenced by people, and I don't know if you can call that a hobby, but looking for places where I feel that I can connect with a place really is something that has always been important for me. And yeah, something that I still enjoy to do. Other than that, I can't really say. I mean, now there are the gardens, my mother's garden and my own balcony garden in Vienna are probably the most important hobby for me right now. And it's a lot of learning, a lot of trial and error. And that's an important issue for me at the moment, because I got a very good theoretical education in organic farming now, I think. And I did a lot of work on organic farms, but I don't have the feeling that I have nearly enough experience, even for a little vegetable garden like mine. Just because there are a lot of things that I know how to do on an organic farm or in gardening, but I'm still learning how to know when to do what and why to do what. I know how to do a lot of tasks, but I haven't learned to be the person who has a plan or who knows what to do at what time. So that's very interesting for me at the moment, this connecting all the dots of what I learned theoretically and what actually happens on my balcony.
You spoke of connecting to a place.
Mm-hmm.
Does it happen very often for you? In any deep way that you've connected to a piece of nature?
Yes, it does, actually. It's the difference is that it's maybe not anymore so much about connecting to what I used to see as pure nature or something. It's more about connecting to a place also by realizing that, I mean, I can only connect to the place because I am a person visiting it, and so even in that interaction, it's already changing, or I'm already changing it by going there, if you know what I mean. I have learned that this community aspect has become more important to me, I think. It's less about nature now than about nature and community, or community using or living in a place and interacting with it, creating it by living there. That's maybe how that has changed for me. And in that sense, I think there have been a number of places where I have felt a really good connection with nature through that connection also with the community. Or, yeah, like that, I think.
You said some things about wanting a about finding out more and more what you wanted in a farm, and maybe thinking you'd found it and then deciding this isn't quite it either. So what does the farm of your dreams look like today, September 17th, 2014?
I would like a farm that is... where to start? I would see a farm that is rather small, maybe run by a few families, or where a few families live and work together, and the farm would provide most of the vegetable and fruit for the people who live there, but also some other products. Maybe there would be animals, maybe not. Maybe some rabbits and goats, preferably. And it would be a place where people work together, but people also have jobs outside or things to do outside, and are organized in a way that both works, or that the farm is not one person's full-time job, but it's more a thing to do together, and distribution of work and so on. But yeah, it would be a beautiful place to live in, and maybe some I don't know the English words for it, but ecological building would be also involved. I'm very interested in that as well, but not in any practical ways yet. So I think the point would be to really try on many levels to live sustainably as a community, and in that way it would be much more than a farm. But I think that a farm, or the farm aspect, is also necessary for the kind of community that I'm looking for. So it's yeah. I wouldn't like a farm if it didn't have the community aspect, and I wouldn't like a community if it was completely unrelated to the land in that way. I think direct marketing is very important to me, and I liked working in shops, so I think that is something that would also be included on this type of farm. And of course, maybe community-supported agriculture would be an option, or working with food co-ops and so on is also something that I'm interested in. And I think it is important to me to also communicate this my way of seeing farms, or the joys of farming, also communicating that to a bigger audience. Or so I've been thinking about, or this group of people that I'm thinking about this with, we've been thinking about also connecting it with education, with maybe workshops and seminars, maybe with school projects, perhaps even a farm close to an alternative school or so, with a lot of collaboration. So it's really about a lot more than just farming, as I said. And it's also I learned a lot now about organic farming, also from a more institutional perspective or the official side and certification and all the things that organic farming also means in the European Union, bureaucracy-wise and so. And I think it's for me. It's very important for me to produce or to work the land in an ecological way, in a sustainable way. But it's less important to me to have a certification or to to participate in large-scale organic markets, or so. That wouldn't really be the idea. It would be as I guess is part of the community-supported agriculture idea and food co-op idea. It would be more about connecting directly with the consumers and creating standards with them, or arranging what kind of products they want or how they should be produced, more in a dialogue with the local people and less bureaucracy and administration and following guidelines that are on a very large scale. What else?
Well, one thing you mentioned is that you have an ideal of community, the same way you have an ideal of the farm, rabbits and goats. But maybe say just a little bit about your ideal of community.
That's something that I'm busy at the moment learning a lot about that, because I really I noticed that it's, especially in when you're talking about communities, it's very easy or I'm an optimistic person, so it's very easy for me to think that it will work out if there are the right kind of people and if we all agree on what we want, etc. But I've been visiting communities with a few friends, or community projects, intentional communities, to find out what we actually really want, or to talk more about it, because I think it's not as straightforward as it may look or as it may seem. So that's still something where I'm exploring, I would say. It's we've been learning a lot about methods for communicating in a community and organizing work and organizing living spaces and so on. And that's something where I'm not sure how that will work, or what the ideal is, or what my ideal is, because I'm still exploring that. That is a newer issue for me than the farming issue.
From the outside, it might seem that you've taken a kind of long way around to get your farm by studying all the different ways that people in 17 countries get farms, and the bureaucratic obstacles in Croatia to young people getting farms and such like. But what have you learned from that investigation that feels useful for you in pursuing your dream?
I've learned that there are really a lot of different approaches to access on land. There are a lot of things that can be done, and that has made me very hopeful or very, very optimistic about my future in farming, but about also more generally young people getting into farming. And I think there's a lot that we can do or that can be done. I don't really know where to start now, because there is, or which level of detail you're also interested in, but there are, for example, in France, there's an organization that works on different levels. It on the one hand, it works financially in that it buys farms and makes them available, like the Dutch project that I've mentioned. But it also goes with the people who are starting new farms or taking over farms through the whole process, which I think is very important. It's an advisory service, actually, and it also runs, or it administers the farms that it has bought, and keeps helping or enabling people to also improve it sustainability wise, and to work on how they produce. And in Germany, for example, there is a whole different, or the approach is to focus on linking farmers who are looking for a successor, and young people looking for a farm, making the matches, but also going through the whole process, and just being a place to go to and get information for people who are thinking about this for the first time, making the subject more well known, because I think that's a very big issue in Austria also, that the old or the quitting farmers need to hear about this possibility, because it's maybe not something they would consider just by themselves, and once it is more common or more popular to have extrafamilial farm succession, that it would also work for more people, or people would trust it more, because they would know people who have done it and so on. So I'm getting a bit lost here. Those are two approaches, and in Austria, the groups that I know of are more local initiatives that are about a specific farm that they want to buy, or that they want to have a project with, and they are looking for ways of funding it, or for ways of taking the land out of the market, and having like a pilot project, and then creating more projects with the same strategy, that kind of thing. I don't really know how to answer that question, because there are so many different things I think about.
Yeah. Well, is it fair to summarize by saying that you see the situation as pretty optimistic. It's pretty hopeful for people like you.
Yes, in the way that I think there are solutions, and I'm also aware that it's there are a lot of obstacles, and I think that's why it's so important to get more into the subject and to do more research on it, because I think it does need a lot of public support and change in policies, and that's not going to happen unless people ask for it, or unless people unless it's an issue that is communicated a lot, I think. And I would say it is still a long way to go, but the solutions, or the possible solutions, are there. And so, yeah, it's really about, I don't know how to say this, but about creating enough I don't know the English word, but maybe enough pressure or enough drive for these ideas to actually become more established and and supported also on a larger scale.
Here's the kind of thing that happens in Minnesota. You have a farmer who has taken very good care of his land, who cares about it. And that farmer becomes too old to farm, and the kids are not interested in taking over the farm. And there are around about a lot of large operations that will not take this kind of care of the land, that will simplify it into monoculture of various kinds. And so the kids say, look, we're millionaires. This land is worth millions of dollars to these monoculture people. And we can live very well on that amount of money. And the father or mother may resist for a while and say, but we'll lose what we care about. But then they get old and the price keeps going up. Now, one way that gets blocked in the United States, in Minnesota anyhow, is that the owners of a farm can put it into a special kind of trust, such that certain uses are excluded. And that is in perpetuity. It's just then a part of how the farm is sold from then on, that it will never be used in certain ways. That makes it much less valuable, but it makes it possible for a CSA or a young farmer to take it over and maintain it on some principles. Now that's a kind of story I'm familiar with. In fact, it's a kind of story that presses close even in my own family. I'm wondering, is it similar here? Is this the story you run into in Austria also?
Yes. Yes, it is. And it's I guess it's very similar as in the United States, the rising age of the farming population and the rising land prices. Also combined with farming not being such an attractive job, or not seen as such a job worth pursuing, that makes it so difficult. And of course a very strong policy also of having to grow or having to quit. That is a very strong trend in Europe, I would say. And it is difficult for small farmers associations and like to really put their foot in the door somewhere and try to change these policies and really get more support for young farmers and get more support for small farms as well. I think it's a bit like a time bomb, actually. It's not gonna be able to, the system is not gonna be able to go on like this much longer, because I think in some cases it's what more than half the farmers are gonna retire in the next 10 years, and in some regions, and it's clear that it's not possible to work the land sustainably if you're gonna just distribute it among the remaining farmers and have bigger farms. And yeah, I think that's why we need really more support, or more structures, also of advisory services, or places for young people to come in, get information, get help, and get connected with places where there are farmers who would like to give their farm to someone else rather than to the neighbors who are already waiting to buy it or buy the land.
So, if there doesn't start to be some dialogue between young people who are interested in farming and farmers about ready to retire or planning to retire in 10 years, the natural course of things will be that the neighbors will buy up the land and farm it worse.
In many cases, I think that is what's happening, yes.
And partly, if I'm understanding you right, everything depends upon there being people like you who've grown up somehow or other with this kind of ideal, or these kinds of experiences, or this kind of hope.
I think it's really not, it's not about the lack of people who want to go into farming. It's just that it's so difficult. I know that a lot of my university colleagues from BOKU are really interested in starting their own farms, and I know it myself, it's, you don't know where to start about it. It's yeah, where do you go? The whole advisory services and so on, or even my study courses are actually designed for people who come from farms or who already know how to take over a farm. There are discussions now, or it's possible that in the next year there will be a group organizing a course on farm startups at my university for the first time in 2015. And I think it's great that that's happening, but it could have happened much earlier maybe. Or when I started studying, I was a bit shy about it because I knew that most people in my course would probably be people who come from farms and who know a lot more about it than I do. And that is the case, but I think about maybe 40%, maybe 50% are people like me who are new to the subject, but very interested in working organically and so on. And maybe 2 years ago there was a bachelor project at my university where a group of people interviewed students in the agricultural courses or in the agricultural studies about their background and their plans in farming or in other jobs. And it turned out that there is a lot of people who are very interested or certain even that they want to start a farm, but most of them do not have a farm to take over. And at the same time, there are a lot of people also studying agriculture who are not sure that they will take over their family farm, but they would have one. So even at my university, I can see that both sides are represented. There are connections with a lot of farmers who don't have successors or maybe don't have successors, and there are a lot of people who are interested in taking over these farms. I really think it's more about providing support and information on how to do this, and also things like the subventions, no, the subsidies. Thank you. Subsidy systems for young farmers, for farm startups, are really lacking. It's more about there is more support for big investments and building a new stable and stuff like that than for young people who maybe want to buy a farm or things like that. It's just that the support structures are lacking, I think.